Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar. My name is Claire Barton, and I will be your host. This webinar is brought to you by the Chartered Governance Institute of Canada, the only global qualifying organization in Canada where you can become a chartered governance professional. For further information about our programs, memberships, and upcoming seminars, I invite you to visit our website at www.cgiofcanada.ca. Today's webinar is entitled Board Composition and Director Selection, Moving Beyond the Skills Matrix. And our guest speaker is Dr. William Holmes. Dr. Holmes received his Doctorate of Business Administration from the University of Southern Queensland and his Master's in Business Administration from the University of British Columbia. He holds a Master of Arts in Philosophy and an undergraduate degree in Economics and Philosophy from the University of Waterloo. He is a chartered professional accountant, an accredited director, and fellow of the Chartered Governance Institute of Canada. Dr. Holmes has held positions at several universities throughout his career and currently serves as an associate professor in the School of Business at Royal Roads University. He has served on several boards as director, treasurer, and chairperson. We are fortunate to have Dr. Holmes serve on CGIC's BC Provincial Board and the National Boards of Directors. Thank you, Dr. Holmes, for joining us today to discuss the importance of board composition and director selection. Before we begin the webinar, I'd just like to mention that everyone has been muted, but if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat line below. And now I will turn things over to Dr. Holmes.
Good morning, everyone, or I guess good afternoon. Greetings from sunny Victoria, BC. Today I want to talk to you about board composition and director selection and moving beyond what I'll call the skills matrix. Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm very privileged to be able to live, work, learn, love, and play on the beautiful ancestral lands of the Kosepsan and Lekwungen peoples. I'm privileged to be here, and I am eternally thankful every time I look around at the beauty of this place. I want to begin by talking about corporate boards and their use of the skills matrix. Boards of directors are the bedrock of corporate governance. All of the monitoring devices that are used in corporate governance, auditors, legislation, regulators, banks, credit agencies, analysts, they all feed into the board of directors. And the boards of directors take into account each of these monitors, and they also have to be aware of all of their stakeholders. Some I've listed here: shareholders, customers, employees, suppliers, creditors, government, local community, and greater society. The boards of directors have a very broad mandate, which includes strategy, looking at ESG issues, environmental, social, and governance issues, complying with regulation, legislation, managing risk, and making financial and other disclosures. Boards of directors have a number of primary roles. Firstly, it's to act as shareholders' fiduciary agent, or agent with fiduciary responsibilities, to hire and evaluate executive management, to approve major operating proposals, and to approve major financial decisions. It's also the role of directors to provide expert advice and counsel to management, and to ensure that firms' activities and financial condition are accurately disclosed and reported to shareholders. The board of directors play a key role in guiding strategy. It's important to remember that they guide strategy and assist management in developing strategy, but their role is not to implement strategy. And finally, it's the director's role to help management recognize, evaluate, and manage risks. So who should be on a board of directors? A corporate board must collectively possess a certain set of skills and attributes that allow them to execute their roles effectively. A list of skills is usually articulated within a board document referred to as a skills matrix. The skills matrix is checked periodically to ensure that the board in aggregate possesses the requisite skills to execute its duties. Here is a simplified sample of a skills matrix. As you can see, the skills that I've listed here include financial acumen, accounting, investment, legal expertise, corporate governance expertise, industry experience as an executive, government connections and experience, human resources, risk management, strategy. In reality, the skills matrix for most boards is much longer than this and can be customized specifically to the need of that specific company. Periodically, usually once a year, the board goes through the process of evaluating itself in aggregate. And each director marks off the skills that they have. The skills are entered on a spreadsheet, and you can see where the required skills lie among the boards of directors. These can be tabulated so that you can see, where there are heavy areas of expertise and where there may be some wanting. It allows you to identify the gaps. Is there expertise missing? And if so, how do we address it? Do we contract in external expertise, or do we go out and find a new director that may have this expertise? Or do we train our current directors so that they then have this expertise? But it's not just gaps. You're also looking for weak areas, where you may only have one director who has expertise in a field. If this director is absent or gets sick or for some reason drops off the board, then all of a sudden you've got some holes. So you want to make sure that your board in aggregate has a complete set of skills that allow you to be effective as a corporate board. My question today is the skills matrix enough? What about other qualities and characteristics? What about empathy, curiosity, collaboration, the ability to solve problems, creativity, teamwork, wisdom? These are hard things for board members to objectively evaluate about themselves. Of course, I'm a good listener. Right? Of course, I have empathy. Of course, I'm creative. People aren't the best judges of some of these characteristics when evaluating themselves. The skills matrix doesn't generally cover the ability of a board to work together, the ability to recognize and understand the needs, wants, and desires of a diversity of stakeholders. It doesn't recognize the ability of the board to be able to recognize and be aware of many of the emerging challenges that face boards and companies today. The board needs the ability to recognize the value of a diversity of thought, perspectives, and experience. The skills matrix doesn't look at the overall collective wisdom of the board or the ability to engage in effective and creative problem solving. So my hypothesis today is that consciously building a diverse and inclusive board of directors can facilitate the acquisition and maintenance of many of the desired attributes not normally covered in the traditional skills matrix. Specifically, what I want to look at today is the relationship between board diversity and the ability of the board to effectively engage in creative problem solving, the collective wisdom of the board, and the position of the board as a learning board. But first, let's talk about the role of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the composition of a board. So why should a board have a diversity of members? Board represents a broad range of stakeholders. Obviously, the traditional view is that the board represents shareholders, but it also represents other stakeholders, ranging from suppliers, customers, right up to community and greater society. Stakeholders represent a diverse set of interests and perspectives that need to be understood by the board. Board membership should ideally reflect the diversity of society. This does raise the question for boards of large companies is what chunk of society are you trying to mirror? Local society, national society, or global? Board diversity includes not just a diversity of skills, but ethnic diversity, religious diversity, racial, physical ability, gender equity, gender identification, sexual orientation, LGBTQ+, age, as well as experience. I could probably go on. This list continues to grow. Lots of corporations are very clear about their reasoning and rationale for engaging in diversity. Tenet Healthcare in the States makes the statement that diversity is the moral and just thing to do. AstraZeneca refers to the strong business case for building a diverse workforce or a diverse board. Board composition should reflect the diversity of society. I want to make a note here that companies need to be careful with their communications with respect to diversity, and I will discuss more on this later. So let's have a look now at diversity and its role in the creative problem-solving process that needs to go on at the board level. Creativity scholars have developed a methodology designed to facilitate creative problem solving. Gerard Puccio, who's at Buffalo State University, is one of the world's leading scholars in creative problem solving, and is convinced that creativity is a skill that can be acquired and developed. But part of his methodology, I'll go into not the whole thing, but once the problem to be addressed is clearly defined, creative problem solvers engage in a process known as divergence and convergence. Divergence involves throwing away constraints, envisioning as many potential solutions or approaches as possible. Some of you may know this as blue sky thinking. or brainstorming. It's a process of ideation, which is think of anything that's possible. Throw the doors open as wide as you can and come up with as many creative solutions to a problem as possible. Once you have a list of all of these creative solutions, you then converge. You reapply constraints. Okay, this possible solution won't work because it's too expensive. This possible solution won't work because we don't have the IT infrastructure to support it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you start limiting the number of choices that you have for a solution. But the possible solutions suggested during the divergence stage that remain after the convergence stage are available to choose from are a list of potentially creative and workable solutions that's broader than the number of solutions you may have first come up with. This is an illustration of the process. When you're diverging in the creative thinking, creative problem solving process, you're creating options. You're thinking of as many possible solutions as you can. Once you have this list of possible solutions, you start making choices. You reapply your constraints. You think about what may work and what won't work. And at the end of the process, you end up with a range of solutions. How does this apply to diversity? I'm going to show you a thought experiment that's actually been run in a number of different studies. If you take two classrooms or two rooms, and one room has a number of groups of individuals who are all from the same background, same religion, same culture, same language, perhaps even same gender. They're people that think alike, people that have a similar worldview. In the next classroom or the next room, you have the same number of groups, but made up of entirely diverse individuals, different cultures, different races, different religions, different backgrounds, different sexual orientations, different ages, different genders, very, very diverse groups of people. Now, what this experiment entails is you give each of these groups a complex business problem to solve. It's the same business problem that is shared with each group. And you tell the groups to go ahead and come up with a solution to this complex business problem. The groups in the homogeneous room, where everyone's of similar backgrounds, work away on this problem and come up with their solutions. They're fairly efficient in the process, and each group comes up with their solution. Upon reviewing the solution, the judges find that the solutions are all valid, they're all workable, they're all fairly similar. Move over to the room with the diverse groups. Coming up with solutions takes a lot longer. And there are heated arguments and debates and disagreements happening within each of the groups. But finally, all of the groups come up with a solution, at least one, sometimes a couple of potential solutions. Upon reviewing the solutions from the diverse group, they're all workable solutions, but they're much more different from each other. And some of them are extremely creative. So what can we gather, or what can we surmise from this experiment? The homogeneous groups solved the problems quickly. The groups found the process collaborative, but the solutions presented were fairly similar across the groups. The diverse groups took longer to arrive at the situations. They debated and argued intensely, but they presented a much more diverse array of very different solutions. So what can I conclude here about diversity and creative problem solving? Diversity is hard. Diversity is challenging. It's time consuming, but it leads to a greater variety of potential solutions to choose from. Diversity in board composition, by extension, can lead to the voicing of a broader range of perspectives and ideas, leading to more informed and creative decision-making. Wisdom is a fascinating subject area. And again, how do you measure the wisdom of a board member? Most people will base it on age, experience, training, education, things like that. But it's a much more ethereal subject matter. There's a rich field of academic research on wisdom. Who has wisdom, what wisdom is, how wisdom is obtained, and how wisdom can be cultivated in individuals and within groups. There's numerous definitions of wisdom proposed by wisdom researchers, ranging from the succinct, doing the right thing for the greater good, all things considered, which I kind of like because it's easy to remember and easy to quote, but to a more detailed version of executive wisdom. It's presented as the actionable ability of a top organizational manager to apply accumulated knowledge, embody moral maturity, manage uncertainty, and engage in reflective strategic decision-making processes that result in A, enlightened strategic judgments, and B, effective implementation of principled actions that help sustain long-term organizational effectiveness and positively impact a firm's most salient stakeholders. Now, this definition is fairly long-winded, but it's pretty comprehensive. Sometimes you have to read it 2 or 3 times to let it sink in. I'll let you do that. The traditional view of wisdom in business is that it is acquired through education, training, professional development, and professional experience. We often assume that age correlates positively with wisdom. And many of you may have experienced the same thing I did. People didn't start listening to me until I started going gray. Okay? I was no wiser. It's just I looked older, so ergo I must be more wise. Clearly not true. Wise leaders, recognized for being wise, were interviewed by a researcher, Faith Matchett, and credited their wisdom to a number of the following characteristics. Firstly, diverse life experiences that in most cases existed outside of their careers, their work, or their professional lives. And these diverse life experiences often had an emphasis on travel and engaging with other cultures and languages. passions, hobbies, and pastimes, again, that existed outside of their professional work. Humility and empathy. Humility, when talking to wise leaders, is an interesting one, because if you identify somebody as wise and you tell them that you think they're wise, they will quite often argue with you and say, what makes you think I'm wise? Right? But they all stated that, the ability of a wise leader to listen objectively is a key symbol of wisdom, and the ability to accept and assimilate a diversity of opinions. So you don't just have to listen to these diversity of opinions, you have to take them on board. And an innate and ongoing curiosity with a focus of continuous learning. One of the things that Dr. Matchett found about wise leaders is almost to one, they thought they didn't know enough. They had more to learn. There was so much that they didn't know. So if we look at wisdom through the lens of diversity, it's the ability to accept and assimilate a variety of perspectives. And this is exactly what you'll get if you're working on a diverse board. Life experiences underlined by exposure to different cultures and different ways of thinking, as well as curiosity and an ongoing search for knowledge. A diverse board will have a diverse set of perspectives, a diverse set of opinions, a diverse set of life experiences in aggregate, and a set of people that think differently from each other, but also have the opportunity to learn from each other. Which brings me to the learning board. So what is a learning board? In the past, board members were acquired based on their industry experience, their executive experience, sometimes their leadership experience, their education, their training, their qualifications. Yes, you want a CPA. Yes, you want a lawyer. Yes, you want somebody who's served in government. Their connections and their access, their prestige. Sometimes being a household name will carry a lot of weight when selecting board members, as well as their achieved positions and recognition. Our current environment is characterized by rapid, fast-changing global environment. There's social, environmental, technological, and economic upheaval. Look at how the world is struggling with inflation, interest rates, the labor shortage, technological issues like cybersecurity, climate-focused technology, clean energy, environmental issues, increased storm activity, just the changes in local in climate, which are leading to migration of pests, diseases, the Canadian pine beetle being one example, and social upheavals, everything from Black Lives Matter to the uprising in Iran, the war in Ukraine. The world is characterized by massive upheaval. There's an increased incident of black swan events, large crises that no one could have predicted, and increased pressures on boards to manage risks and recognize these emerging issues. So what does this mean for a board member? Well, board members can no longer rely on their past experience to carry them through the governance process. Just because you've had a long career, are well qualified in your field, and have had many life experiences, doesn't mean you necessarily know what's coming next. A learning board who's learning about emerging issues, current issues, is essential for a board to be successful and successfully execute its governance duties. I appear to be frozen. Bear with me 1 minute. I apologize, my screen seems to be frozen. There we go. So what exactly is a learning board? Apologies for that, everybody. A learning board actively educates its members on emerging topics: cybersecurity, diversity, equity, inclusion, social issues, climate change and adaptation, technology adoption and disruption, et cetera, et cetera. The list goes on. A learning board seeks out new board members with knowledge and expertise in emerging areas. It educates its members through professional development activities or the use of external expertise. If it doesn't have the knowledge required, sometimes they're forced to bring in consultants to help provide them with the knowledge they need. A learning board listens to and considers a broad range of opinions from a diversity of board members and stakeholders. Having a diverse board makes a positive contribution to a learning board. Diverse board members can educate the board on impending or potential emerging issues that the board might not have otherwise been aware of. It can provide the board with greater understanding of the impacts that emerging issues have on diverse stakeholders. And it can offer a greater range of perspectives on how to approach emerging issues, as well as contributing to a greater range of creative solutions to these emerging issues. So I've used the term diversity a lot throughout this presentation, but diversity without inclusion cannot be effective. Inclusion requires the full and equal participation by all members of the board. Inclusion requires that the input and contributions of all members receive due consideration and the respect of all the other members. Inclusion requires that diverse board members are respected for the value of their contributions as effective board members because they make valuable contributions to the board as individuals in their own right. It's not enough just to have people of diverse backgrounds on your board. They have to participate, they have to be listened to, and their perspectives have to be duly considered by the rest of the board. It's important to remember the individual board member. The fact that they're from a diverse background is not their only quality. They are an individual. A recent series of studies by Georgiak and Ratton found that individuals who identified as being from diverse backgrounds were actually less likely to want to work for companies who claimed to embrace diversity, because diversity is the morally right thing to do, or diversity is good for business. In their research, Georgiak and Ratton found that diverse peoples who looked at a company who stated that their commitment to diversity rested in their belief that it was the morally right thing to do, basically concluded that diversity for this company was tokenism, and they wanted to show that they had diverse members on the board. Alternatively, companies that claim that diversity is good for business were only interested in the bottom line and not really in what diverse board members had to offer. They surmised, Georgiak and Ratton surmised that diverse individuals were sensitive to messaging with respect to diversities, and that diverse individuals wanted to be hired because of the value that they as individuals can bring to the organization. Now, and logically, this would extend to board members as well as employees. Now, it's not that this value is disconnected from their diverse backgrounds or their diverse experiences, but it becomes part of the person as a whole. The role of the chair is key to fostering an inclusive board. All right, the chair's role is to facilitate dialogue among and between all board members. You may often see a chair sitting back and taking in the discussion. They will quite often act more as a facilitator to draw out a diversity of opinions. And debate and respectful conflict is a positive trait of a board. It's also the role of the chair to ensure that respectful interactions between and among board members and between board and management, and to ensure the recognition, consideration, and inclusion of all member contributions. It doesn't mean that every idea needs to be implemented or actioned, but it means that all the ideas and all the perspectives deserve consideration. It's important, just as with the use of the skills matrix, that the board evaluate itself periodically. Generally, this is once a year, sometimes more often, but evaluating the board requires self-evaluation, evaluation by management, and possibly evaluation by other stakeholders. It includes a candid evaluation of board culture and board leadership. And one of the functions of this periodic evaluation is to recognize gaps that need to be filled. These gaps could include unrepresented or underrepresented stakeholder groups, missing expertise or experience, such as missing HR experience that was in our example of the skills matrix. The requirement for new expertise in emerging issues, and any other absent identified traits or characteristics or qualities that the board believes that it would benefit from. How do you identify and recruit diverse board members? Everyone has heard this statement at one time or another. Quote, "We can't find diverse board members with the required education, skills, and/or experience." This is no longer a valid argument. Those diverse board members are out there. You just have to look a little harder to find them. For many board members, looking for new board members was easy. You just pull from your own network. But your own network generally is made up of people similar to you, similar background, similar career track, similar age. You need to look outside your own network to find a diversity of board members. Qualified individuals from diverse backgrounds are out there. We just need to look harder. We need to be willing to train and develop high potential diverse board members. You may find someone who's a little young, who you recognize as having the type of experience and knowledge that you need, but may not have experience as a board member or in executive leadership. Be willing to train, be willing to mentor these people because they will become valuable board members. And consider expanding your board to accommodate high potential diverse board members that you may come across. Managing board size is quite difficult. And once you get beyond a certain size, say beyond 12 or 13 board members, a board tends to get unwieldy. But if you see the opportunity to grab a diverse board member who will add significantly to the expertise in your board, it may be worth expanding your board by one seat to make room for this diverse individual. So in conclusion, diversity brings a broad variety of perspectives, which can contribute to more creative and informed problem solving. A diverse and inclusive board can share a greater variety of experiences, fostering greater collective wisdom. And inclusion and sharing of a diversity of perspectives contributes to a learning board. Following are some of the references that I used in the presentation. And I would now like to throw open the door to any questions or comments that anyone from the audience may have. Claire, I'll turn it back over to you.
So if anybody has any questions, you can write them in the chat line or come right out and ask. Okay, questions for William.
Hi. Hi, Sunil.
Hello.
Oh, hi, William. Thank you so much for a great presentation. Thank you so much. I was wondering if you can add some color in terms of any large organization, and there are many subsidiary boards, and most board members are employees of the organization. So how does it translate in terms of diversity for those subsidiary boards?
So the issue of internal board members is interesting, and many boards will have executive members on the board. It's very unusual for Canadian companies to have a joint chair and CEO. This has been recognized as kind of a conflict of interest. That still happens in the States, but it doesn't happen in Canada. The majority of board members and Canadian corporations tends to be external. Yes, you may have some executive members on the board that represent senior management. These people may or may not be from diverse backgrounds. But when you're looking at a board, you want to look at it in aggregate. So you're looking at the whole board. And while there may be some internal members, the majority are external. And with most boards having terms, there's a constant rollover of directors, which gives you the opportunity, as you take on new directors and exit former directors, to ensure that you're maintaining a certain level of diversity on your board.
Okay.
Did I answer your question, Neil?
Yeah, thank you. That's great. But I mean, what if there is other way around, like most members being internal and very few are non-executive who are just by way of any regulatory requirement to have? So in that case, it's a bit of a challenge to make sure that we have diverse board,
It's not easy, right? It takes a concerted effort.
Yeah, but you're right. That director term thing will help in a way that we have new people, new blood on the board.
So I just saw a question in the chat.
Yeah.
And somebody asked, do we need more women on boards? Easy answer to that question, yes. Interestingly, there's been a significant amount of research on the relationship between women on boards and corporate performance. And it has been found that there is a positive correlation. Boards with who are more sort of gender balanced are more likely to have better corporate social responsibility programs, which are connected to like better corporate governance systems, which are ultimately end up ensuring better financial performance. So, it's very difficult to quantify these things, but women on boards provide a significant amount of value. It's not a stretch to say that women think differently than men. And so if you have members of both genders on a board, you are going to get more discussion, more debate, and again, for the reasons stated in this presentation, a broader set of solutions to any given problems. And yes, it is International Women's Day. The problem with a behavior skills matrix, which could be appended to just the regular standard skills matrix, is that individuals aren't necessarily the best judges of their own behavior. And that's why an evaluation at a behavioral level needs to be done by the board as a collective and needs some external input as well. It's easy for me to say, yes, I have financial expertise. It's more difficult for me to say, oh, I'm a good listener and I'm good at assimilating diverse opinions. Of course, I would say that. Whether it's true or not is very difficult to measure. Let's see, Claire, do you have a question that you think I should?
I'm just reviewing. I think you've answered a good portion. Let's see. Outside North America, and perhaps primarily in Europe, larger corporations, particularly publicly listed companies, may have advisory boards on top of normal boards of directors. Would you think it advisable for North American companies to consider setting up such advisory boards to help with equitably including diversity in board level? Is a question.
You know, that's an interesting statement, and Europe is quite different. I know in Germany, for instance, the vast majority of board members are internal. Okay? So you have the company executive, and they all serve on the board. And I'm not sure that adds to diversity. I mean, it probably leads to things like groupthink and things like that. I like the idea of having an advisory board for the board, which is interesting because the board acts as an advisory board for management. So you get advisors advising advisors. And there's a risk of disappearing into your own navel, right? You still have a company to govern. And so in certain instances, an advisory board may serve a valid purpose, but I would be reluctant to say that every board should have an additional advisory board. I like the question of whether it would be good to incorporate quality and personal characteristics in individual director position descriptions. I don't have a lot of experience looking at director position descriptions, but if you're looking for a director with a specific skill set, that's where the skills matrix comes in. You need someone with legal expertise or, government experience or industry experience. That's fine. I think if you're broadening your position description, board members asking for personal qualities like being a good listener, assimilating diverse perspectives and positions, ability to learn from others. Again, it's more difficult for the candidate to be able to realistically judge themselves. Of course, I'm a good listener. Again, of course, I listen to everybody without bias and consider different perspectives equally. Whether you actually do or not might be another question. And it's difficult in, say, a board interview, or when a nominating committee is interviewing a prospective board member, to actually really get a good feel for whether they have these characteristics. When you think about it, boards are interesting because the types of people that are often pursued as board members are corporate leaders. They're people that are used to rolling up their sleeves and getting operational. And that's not the job of the board. Right? The job of the board is to monitor the executive, to guide the executive in their execution of their duties in managing the company. So quite often it's difficult for executives who become board members to, say, keep out of the kitchen. Making it clear that it's their job to keep out of the kitchen is often something that boards struggle with as well.
I have a question here, Dr. Holmes. What are your views on the expansions of the D&I criteria to include those that are neurodiverse? And let's see.
So neurodiversity is something that's kind of near and dear to my heart. I have a good friend who's incredibly successful, but dyslexic. He has a great deal of trouble reading and recognizing words, and he struggled in high school, and it wasn't until he came across mentors who appreciated the fact that his thinking wasn't stunted. There was nothing wrong with it. It was simply different. And as an example of how this neurodiversity and acceptance and bringing in this neurodiversity can have very positive outcomes, this particular fellow, because of his dyslexia, has the ability to see and envision and structure very complex relational databases, which I don't know about for you is all black box for me. I don't understand it at all. But neurodiverse people who think differently have different skills than the rest of us. Skills which are no less important and can be valuable in providing different and diverse insights and creative solutions to problems. So yes, I truly believe that diversity needs to include those who are neurodiverse.
Well, there's another question here. Oops, where did it go? Should potential directors complete psychometric tests to assist with the soft skills analysis?
You know, that's an interesting question. And many boards do this. And I've been subject to these psychometric tests as well. And I would hate to make it mandatory, but I believe that it's very beneficial. And, you know, I don't know how many of you have engaged in some of these tests, but, you know, seeing the results of your own test can be quite enlightening. oh, that's why I behave that way. Oh yeah, of course I do that. So I would be reluctant to make it mandatory, but yes, I definitely see the benefits.
And we have one more question. Can you provide any guidance on how the DE&I views of directors can be aligned to the culture of the organization?
So that's a very good question. And one of the things, actually, one of the studies that one of my doctoral students is working on in the mining industry is the fact that there's a lot of discussion and debate about women and diverse individuals on boards in the mining industry. And a lot of mining companies are making a concerted effort to make their boards and make their boards more diverse. However, this study reveals that that diversity has not filtered down a level into the executive ranks, which are still predominantly male, not exclusively male, but predominantly male of similar backgrounds. So at least in North America anyway. So diversity is important at all levels of an organization. And, you know, while I've been talking about board diversity, I think it's equally important at the C-suite level, the executive level, the managerial level, and the staff level. And all of those different perspectives and opinions need to be respected.
Well, I think if anybody has any other questions for you, can they contact you at your email address here?
I've included my email address. I'm happy to connect with anyone in the audience. So please feel free to reach out. And you know, this presentation has been kind of an aggregate of 3 different strains of research, and it's been very interesting for me to put it together and summarize it. And so I'd like to thank you all for listening.